Let me just say, nothing is harder than telling PvE players that a weapon only obtainable inside of PvP might actually be amazing for PvE. Most of the time, you guys just say, you know what? I don't give a damn. I'm gonna keep rocking what I got. There ain't no way in hell you're gonna get me to play PvP. Guys, get ready. There is overlap in Destiny right now, more so than ever. The new Stasis Rocket Assisted Sidearm that's gonna be coming with Iron Banner in just a few short weeks is gonna be an amazing weapon to have inside of PvE. And yes, it will require you to play other players. I know, it's a crazy thing to ask. However, there is another weapon that is also only obtainable inside of Trials. That is the rocket launcher Tomorrow's Answer. And this is the rocket launcher that I wanted us to look at because I do think it has potential here inside of PvE. It's a void high impact frame rocket launcher, which actually got a buff not that long ago. It's got some nasty perk combinations, making it one of the stronger weapons to use in damage rotations. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Tomorrow's Answer though. We're going to see what makes this weapon so strong and how to take full advantage of it. But let me preface this by saying this weapon is only obtainable in Trials of Osiris, which is not everyone's favorite playlist. I get it, man. I sweat every weekend just for a day, and just one day is enough for me, man. Luckily, though, you could focus this thing. If you have Trials Ingrams, there's a huge incentive to play with an entire fire team, which drops Trials Ingrams regularly if it's not bugging out. And yes, there's some weird bug going on where Trials Ingrams were not dropping. Don't ask me how to work around this. I'm still trying to figure it out. And then, of course, there's a way to get the Adept version without having to go flawless. Will this require you to play other players? Yes. Will it require you to aim your weapon and possibly shoot them in the face? Yes to that too. I know. Cross, you're getting way too ahead of yourself. You're asking way too much of us. I get it. Now let's talk about this weapon. First up, its frame is high impact, which in comparison to other rocket launchers, it has the highest blast radius. Now do note, blast radius does not affect rockets like it does grenade launchers. Again, for GLs, you want lower blast radius. The lower, the better. Now Tomorrow's Answer actually has one of the higher stability and handling stats. Stability doesn't really matter as much, but the handling is pretty nice. But it also has the lowest velocity at 45. Now, high impacts and precisions do have a base reserve of 9 rockets as opposed to the normal 7. Now, if we take a look at this graphic from Court, we could see that all the launcher frames have different damage scaling. Essentially, precision frames have a 0.95 times damage multiplier. High impacts have a 1-time multiplier, and adaptives and aggressives both have a 1.1 multiplier. By the way, huge shout out to Court over on Twitter. He has amazing graphics. Feel free to check out his link down below. Now, what does this mean for Tomorrow's Answer? Well, it means that base is dealing slightly less damage compared to things like Apex Predator. And that is why Tomorrow's Answer has those 2 extra rockets in reserves. Keep in mind, this is also an improvement. Bungie actually buffed this, really trying to push us in the direction to consider high impacts and even precisions. But now let's go over the perks on Tomorrow's Answer. Probably the most standout perk in that third column is the new perk Envious Arsenal. Dealing damage with both other weapons before readying this weapon refills it from reserves. Basically, you want to think of this as like bait and switch, but instead of granting you a damage bonus, this will reload the weapon from reserves, with the enhanced version granting you plus 20 to your inventory size stat, which is the equivalent of having a reserve mod equipped. The enhanced version of this, guys, by the way, is definitely worth it. Bungie doesn't allow us to armor swap anymore with reserve mods, so in order to actually get that bump in your reserves, you actually have to keep that reserve mod on at all times. Now, this is an S tier perk for DPS, and it's also what's made weapons like Chill Inhibitor so sought after. It's actually the reason why people discovered Wakegate. Everybody was like, yo, I need Chill Inhibitor. I need Envious Arsenal, bait and switch. And then suddenly they were like, dude, I'm not getting this perk combination. Thus led to everyone collecting their data, presenting their evidence. No lie, guys, this is a hell of a community. Now, what this allows you to do is when you pair this with, say, another weapon with Envious Arsenal, take Liturgy, for example, both your special and heavy weapons will always be ready to fire. It's an amazing perk, guys, not just for this weapon, but really for any weapon that can roll with it. Now, next up is also an interesting perk to see on a rocket launcher, that being Withering Gaze. This is another new one. It reads that aiming this weapon for a short period of time without firing grants the ability to weaken the next target. Now, the timer resets after firing or when you stop aiming down sights. Now, this takes 1.5 seconds to activate, and the timer starts as soon as you ADS, not when you're actively aiming down sights. Again, the moment the input is pressed. Now, the enhanced version kind of sucks, dude. It lowers that time duration that you need to hit the ADS input from 1.5 seconds to 1.4. Come on, Bungie, and at least make it half a second better. Now, the weaken applied by this perk is the same strength as, say, a void weakening grenade, that being a 15% debuff. This also slows the target's movement speed by 20%, which lasts for 6 seconds. Now, at first, we thought that maybe this perk could be a sleeper pick, but this just turns out to be too clunky for solid DPS. And who the hell is aiming with a rocket launcher? You see, not only do you have to aim down sights for 1.5 seconds to proc the perk, but since the first shot is applying the weaken, that shot hits for base damage. Essentially, you're only getting 1, maybe 2 shots of the debuff being applied. And if you decide to reapply it, well, then you're looking at find another DPS loss to get the perk to proc all over again. It's an interesting perk, guys, and I do see Withering as a potential S tier pick on other weapons, but on a rocket launcher, I wouldn't go for this, especially considering in most damage phases, we already have a means of applying a debuff. Someone is throwing a tether down or a weakening grenade. There are multiple other options that doesn't impede on your DPS. Now, Envious Assassin is also present here. This has always been a very good perk. Defeating targets with other weapons before drawing this one transfers ammo to the magazine from reserves. This effect can overflow the mag based on the number of targets defeated. Essentially, after scoring kills with your other equipped weapon, this will either refill or overfill the mag from reserves based on the amount of weapon kills that you got. Now, for a rocket launcher, you're looking at 1 extra rocket being loaded, with 3 rockets being loaded with the enhanced version of Envious Assassin. Now, this takes us to our 4th column. I think the perk everyone's going to be looking at is, of course, Bane Switch. Dealing damage with all equipped weapons within a short time gives this weapon a damage boost. Now, this is a 30% increase in damage. It used to be 35%, but Bungie toned it back. But the base version of this perk lasts for 10 seconds, with the enhanced version kicking that damage up to 11 seconds. Now, this cannot be reactivated until that buff timer reaches 0. So keep that in mind, guys. However, the ability to self-proc that 30% extra damage makes it too good. It's not like Explosive Light where we're relying on orbs. And over an extended damage phase, especially for my solo players, Bait and Switch is probably always going to be your best bet. One of the biggest issues I have with Explosive Light is that even though it is a good perk, giving you 6 rockets, a 25% increase in damage when picking up 6 orbs, or 7 with the enhanced version, keep in mind, Wolfpack rounds do not receive that damage increase. It's a good alternative if you can't get Bait and Switch, but Bait and Switch is definitely the S tier choice. Now, interestingly enough, Bipod is the other perk you want, and this is where we start talking about the Adept version of Tomorrow's Answer. You see, the Adept version has double traits in that final column, and the God roll would actually be Bait and Switch with Bipod. You see, Bipod increases our shots per mag up to 2, but it does lower our damage, as well as our blast radius and reload speed. Now, these decreases here are -30 to blast radius, -20 to reload speed, and it also reduces our damage by 25%. Overall, this is not the best perk on a rocket launcher outside of like using it to add clear in certain GM nightfalls. I've done it in the past, most notably like Battleground nightfalls, where we have heavy ammo that we could top off and literally use my heavy almost as a primary. But I bring up this perk because of the clip from BogOnMyDog. Check him out over on Twitter, guys. He does content for Destiny, but he actually rolled both Bait and Switch and Bipod. And what this allows him to do is he will rally with Bipod, get the full ammo amount, which look at that ammo count, but then he would swap off to Bait and Switch while keeping the extra rockets. This is almost like a shiny drop. Think of like Edge Transit. Everybody was going for that Envious Assassin cascade roll with Bait and Switch. Tomorrow's Answer kind of falls within that same threshold, and that would be the God roll, especially when paired with Envious Arsenal. Now, do our origin traits here play any major role inside of PvE? Well, we have 3 origin traits to choose from: Alacrity, One Quiet Moment, and Wildcard. Alacrity gives you things like increased reload speed, stability, aim assist, and range when you're the last living member of your fire team or running solo. So definitely a perk you could use while solo, but at the same time, we're probably not going to be reloading all that much considering we're using Envious Arsenal. Next one is One Quiet Moment, which grants us increased reload speed and handling when out of combat. Also another one that's all right, but again, not something that can benefit us directly in combat. Lastly, though, we do have Wildcard, and I don't know, man, I just got a thing for Telesto bolts, but final blows with this weapon have a chance to create experimental submunitions at the target's location. Now, these are literally Telesto bolts, both in its aesthetic and just how it works. These submunitions drop on the ground, they last for 10.5 seconds, and they do some extra damage to targets that walk over the top of them. Now, it's nothing crazy, and I would say the origin trait that most people are probably going to use will be Alacrity if they're running solo, and then just kind of whatever if running with the group. But with all of that out of the way, what is the God roll? Definitely Envious Arsenal Bait and Switch is the way to go, whether you get that on the base version of the weapon or the Adept version. If you're rocking double special, especially weapons like Witherhoard, which does damage over time, and another special weapon, it makes for that Envious Arsenal proc to be very fluid. And again, you can also utilize this with other weapons that have Envious Arsenal, like Liturgy. Now, if you don't get Bait and Switch, Explosive Light is another good damage perk, although I do think Bait and Switch is the better choice. Then as far as the God roll goes, definitely Impact Casing, definitely Bait and Switch and Bipod for the swap off with Envious Arsenal. That is the way to go, guys. Now, let me just say, if you get Bait and Switch, Bipod, Bipod, Envious Arsenal, but you don't happen to get impact casing, it's okay. It's 2% more damage, but don't kill that roll. That's still a good roll. It's not vital. It's just the God roll. And I would say for your barrel perk, something like hard launch, quick launch, linear compensator, something to bump up that velocity. Now, as far as DPS testing, I do want to give a quick disclaimer here. All of these tests were done at Greg while in a Luna faction, well, with Wolfpack rounds. We fired every rocket launcher until they were out of ammo or until the damage phase ended, whichever happened first. Lastly, this is strictly a rocket to rocket comparison. So for Apex, for example, we aren't going to be using any other weapon to boost damage. We strictly wanted to see the numbers for the rockets. Now with that out of the way, let's start with tomorrow's answer. The roll with Envious Arsenal and bait and switch that I got, we did a total damage value of 1,716,857 damage over 28 seconds. Now this equates to a DPS value of 61,026. Now you definitely see the damage dropping off here with Withering Gaze and bait and switch, and that's due to the time it takes to proc that perk, coming out to 1.4 million damage, or a little over that, over 27.7 seconds, giving us a DPS value of 52,185. Now Apex Predator, which is an adaptive frame, and has been a top pick for quite a while, this reconstruction bait and switch roll, it actually gives us a total damage value of 1.467 over 23 seconds, which gives us a DPS value a little bit higher at 63,945. Now keep in mind, this is over 8 shots on Apex versus the 10 shots on tomorrow's answer. Again, this isn't taking into account any other external factors, like how long the damage phase really actually is. So while Apex does do a bit more DPS, tomorrow's answer would beat it out over a longer damage phase because of those 2 extra shots. Now, something to keep in mind is we do have another grenade launcher, an aggressive frame one, that being Crux Termination. Now, Crux puts out, if you got the right roll, this slide shot explosive light roll technically has the best DPS, with the surrounding roll being even better than this. Granted though, who wants to be surrounded by targets when firing a rocket launcher? That's some scary stuff. Now, the total damage isn't as much, 1.3 million or 1.345, but you're able to put this out over 11.5 seconds for a whopping DPS of 117,806. Now, keep in mind, this is extremely dangerous. You're sliding on the ground to reload your weapon. We actually tried this a long time ago with 6 Guardians, and guess what? It went about as well as you would think. I think like maybe 3 of us were alive at the end of it because we kept shooting each other. Now, moving on to another adaptive frame, we have Hothead with Field Prep and Explosive Light. Keep in mind, Field Prep does add on 2 extra shots. This gives us a total damage value of 1.5 million with a DPS of 71,345, just being right behind Crux. And lastly, we have Crowning Duologue. This is a precision frame, and I know a lot of us don't really talk about precision frames, but I've got this reconstruction bait and switch roll. It gives us 1.283 million damage with a DPS of 54,435. And the main takeaway here is that tomorrow's answer without external help is definitely not going to beat Apex, but it does have a satisfying loop that you can play into, literally allowing you to never have to manually reload ever. And the reason why we're bringing this up is because auto-loading holster and reconstruction did get a nerf here recently. Bungie increased the time it takes to start reloading by 2 seconds for both the base and enhanced versions of reconstruction, which is pretty substantial when we talk about DPS phases. Envious Arsenal is a perk we're probably going to see more of, and it's a trait on certain weapons that I'm definitely going to be entertaining for my own damage rotations. I do believe this rocket launcher is an absolute beast, and even in our rocket to rocket comparison, you may not see that. Keep in mind, I don't even have the adept version with Bipod as a swap off, but I do believe this is a rocket launcher worth going after, and on the weekends it'll be dropping inside of Trials of Osiris. I'll personally be going for it. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.